Something is building around the WNBA, and it is no longer just about one foul, one game, or one officiating controversy. There is a deeper tension running through the league right now, and it may come to a head at All-Star Weekend. That tension has been visible for a while, but recent comments from veteran players have made it harder to ignore. Because the conversation around Caitlin Clark has shifted, it is no longer only about how she plays. It is about who watches her, who follows her, and what the league expects her to do about the parts of that audience it does not like. That is where this story gets complicated. Because for years, the WNBA was a small, tight-knit community. Players knew each other personally. The fan base was passionate, politically engaged, and deeply invested in what the league represented beyond basketball. The WNBA has long been known as more than just a basketball league. For many players and fans, it has also represented a community built around shared values, and for a long time that model worked, even if it never generated massive mainstream attention. Then Caitlin Clark arrived, and everything changed fast. What makes this different is the speed of the change. Most sports leagues grow gradually. Ratings increase over years. Attendance climbs little by little. Sponsors slowly become more interested. That is not what happened here. The WNBA experienced a surge unlike anything in its history. Games that once attracted niche audiences suddenly became national talking points. Road arenas started selling out weeks in advance. Television partners began moving games into premium time slots because the demand was there. That kind of growth creates excitement, but it also creates pressure, because every league has systems that were built for a certain level of attention: officiating, security, media strategy, crisis management. Suddenly, all of those systems are being tested at once, and when they struggle to keep up, every controversy becomes bigger than it otherwise would have been. Indiana Fever games suddenly drew sellout crowds. ESPN moved WNBA games into primetime slots. Merchandise sales exploded. The league signed a massive new media rights deal. That should have been a celebration. Instead, it created friction. Because the audience that came with Clark did not look exactly like the audience the league was used to. Some were casual basketball fans, some came from college basketball, some cared only about the game, some were loud, opinionated, and sometimes hostile online. Some came from very different backgrounds and perspectives than the league's longtime fan base. And that is where the current tension really lives, because when a league grows fast, the audience changes, and not every part of that new audience is going to behave the way the old audience did. That is uncomfortable. It is also unavoidable, because that is how mainstream growth works. You do not get to scale from niche to national without bringing in people who do not all share the same worldview, the same politics, or the same behavior online. That is true for every sport. The NBA went through it, the NFL went through it. Every league that grows past its original community goes through it. The WNBA is going through it right now. History shows that rapid growth almost always creates uncomfortable conversations. New fans often see the sport differently than longtime supporters. They focus on different players. They argue differently online. They consume highlights instead of full games, and sometimes they challenge traditions that longtime fans see as essential. None of that automatically means one group is right and the other is wrong. It simply means the audience has changed. Every major sports league has had to adapt when its audience expanded beyond its original core. The challenge is finding a way to welcome new fans without making longtime supporters feel like the league is leaving them behind. That balancing act is one of the hardest parts of sustained growth, and Caitlin Clark is at the center of it, not because she asked to be, but because her arrival accelerated the timeline. That is what makes the current conversation around her so revealing. Some veteran players have spoken openly about their frustration with how fans are treating them online. That frustration is real. Some of the messages players receive are genuinely ugly, unacceptable, and should be condemned. There is no defending hate speech, racism, or threats. But there is a difference between condemning hate speech and demanding that an entire audience be pushed away because some of its members behave badly. That is where the conversation becomes much harder, because if the message becomes the new fans are toxic and the league needs to do something about them, the league has a serious problem. The same attention that brought the $2.2 billion media deal, the sold-out arenas, and the merchandise surge also brought noise, criticism, and sometimes worse. You cannot separate the two. Mainstream growth always comes with both, and that is the real tension heading into All-Star Weekend. Because when some veteran players suggest Clark should do more to address the behavior of parts of her fan base, they are asking her to do something no athlete in any sport has ever been asked to do. LeBron James cannot control what Lakers fans say online. Stephen Curry cannot prevent Warriors fans from being rude. Patrick Mahomes cannot monitor millions of people who watch him play. No athlete is responsible for the behavior of everyone who enjoys watching them. Social media has changed the relationship between athletes and fans. 20 years ago, players rarely saw what strangers were saying about them online. Today, every controversial moment is instantly clipped, reposted, debated, and amplified millions of times. That creates an environment where a relatively small number of toxic comments can suddenly feel much larger than they actually are. It also creates enormous pressure on athletes to respond to situations they never created. Fans expect statements, reporters ask questions, social media demands reactions. Yet remaining silent is often interpreted as taking a side even when that may not be the athlete's intention at all. That is part of the reality modern athletes face, regardless of the sport they play. Expecting Caitlin Clark to police her entire audience is not only unfair, it is impossible. And that is what makes this moment so strange. Because the WNBA is for the first time dealing with the reality of mainstream attention at scale. And mainstream attention is messy. It includes people you like and people you do not. It includes fair criticism and unfair attacks. It includes passionate support and ugly behavior. That is the cost of growth. And the league has to decide how it wants to handle it. There is a version of the WNBA that stays small, ideologically cohesive, and comfortable. That version is also financially unsustainable. There is a version that embraces mainstream growth, accepts a bigger, messier audience, and learns how to manage it. That version is harder, but it is the only path toward long-term stability. The league faces a difficult balancing act. It wants to embrace record growth while also addressing concerns about parts of the new audience. It cannot cash in on Clark's popularity while treating her fan base as a problem to be solved. And it cannot ask a young player to alienate the very audience that made the league's current growth possible. The bigger question is what success should actually look like for the WNBA over the next 5 years. Is the goal simply to grow ratings? Is it to protect the culture that helped build the league? Or is it to find a balance between those two objectives? Those questions may sound abstract today, but they will influence almost every major decision the league makes going forward. Marketing, broadcast schedules, expansion, sponsorships, player branding, even the way controversial moments are communicated publicly. Because every rapidly growing sports league eventually reaches a point where its old identity and its new audience no longer fit together perfectly. The WNBA appears to be reaching that point now. That does not mean the league is in crisis. It means it is evolving. And evolution almost always brings uncomfortable conversations before it brings stability. That is the real story behind the all-star conversation. Not a conspiracy, not a planned confrontation, not a hotel room scene. A league in transition trying to figure out what it wants to be now that it finally has the attention it spent decades chasing. And Caitlin Clark is the player forcing that question into the open, not because she tried to, but because the market decided she was the one who changed everything. How the WNBA handles this moment will say a lot about where the league is heading, because the old model does not work anymore. The new model is already here, and the tension between those two things is not going away just because it is uncomfortable.